This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We're broadcasting on over 750 stations on Pacific and NPR and low-power FM and college and community radio stations, on public access TV and PBS TV stations, and both TV satellite networks, and Dish Network Channel 9415 Free Speech TV and 9410 Link TV, and on DirecTV Channel 375. And we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Well, on Wednesday, our guest, Chris Field, testified before the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. The Republican minority invited Princeton University physicist William Happer to testify at the same hearing. He's a former Energy Department official and chair of the board of directors of the George Marshall Institute, an organization that's reportedly received $715,000 from ExxonMobil since 1998. This is a part of what Professor Happer had to say.
The increasing concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere will cause some warming of the Earth's surface. The key question is, will the net effect of the warming and any other effects of CO2 be good or bad for humanity? I believe the increase of CO2 will be good. I predict that future historians will look back on this period much as we now look back on the period just before we passed the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to prohibit the manufacturing, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors. At the time, the 18th Amendment seemed to be exactly the right thing to do. It was the 1917 version of saving the planet from the ravages of climate change. More than half the states enacted prohibition laws before the 18th Amendment was finally ratified. Only one state, Rhode Island, voted against, and my hat's off to the senator from Rhode Island. I'm sorry he's not here. Well, there were many people who thought that prohibition might do more harm than good, but they were completely outmatched by the temperance movement, whose motives and methods had much in common with the movement to stop climate change. Deeply sincere people thought they were saving humanity from the evils of alcohol, just as many people now sincerely think they're saving humanity from the evils of CO2. Prohibition was a mistake, and our country's probably still not fully recovered from the damage it did. For example, institutions like organized crime got their start in that era. Drastic limitations on CO2 are likely to damage our country in an analogous way. There's tremendous opportunity for corruption there.
Professor Happer of Princeton University. Professor Field, your response.
Well, there's been a tremendous amount of science to assess the likely impacts of rising CO2 on climate, and the IPCC overwhelmingly concludes that the overall impact is likely to be sharply negative. I think that as we look at new science, we see increasing validation of the conclusions of the IPCC in terms of the mechanisms of climate change and in terms of the impacts of climate change. You know, the assessment of whether the issue of prohibition is relevant to climate, I think, is really a red herring. There's essentially never been an activity that's where the scientific community has been as coordinated and it's careful in its assessment as it's been with climate change. And to say that, well, sometimes the science is wrong, just really doesn't reflect the amount not only of careful thinking and coordination, but also the amount of testing of all the ideas that's gone into the modern scientific assessment of climate change. You know, essentially every component of our understanding has been scrutinized and tested and evaluated from different directions. And although there's still a lot we don't understand completely, some of which I've already talked about this morning, the overall analysis of where we're headed and what the mechanisms are is just deeply well established.
Well, we want to thank you for being with us, Chris Field, professor of biology and environmental earth science at Stanford University.
And we also wanted to ask if you might stay with us as we're joined by a guest in Washington, because we want to get your comment on the politics of and the money behind those who are lobbying against the whole issue of climate change. Juan?
Yes, well, a new report from the Center for Public Integrity reveals that the number of global warming lobbyists has increased by more than 300% in the past 5 years. The center found that just in the past year, some 770 companies hired over 2,000 climate change lobbyists and spent an estimated $90 million to influence federal policy on climate change. Although the explosive growth of the climate change lobby has also seen an increase in those lobbying for alternative energy and environmental and health issues, they are far outnumbered by other interests by 8 to 1. Some of these other interests include the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, large coal, oil, and gas companies, Wall Street banks, and the American Coalition for Clean Coal Electricity. Their lobbyists include powerful former Congress members, White House staffers, and officials from previous administrations.
The report cites NASA scientist James Hansen's warning that, quote, special interests will dilute and torque government policies, causing the climate to pass tipping points with grave consequences for all life on the planet. We're joined now from Washington, D.C. by the lead writer of the report, Marianne Lavelle, staff writer at the Center for Public Integrity. Welcome to Democracy Now! Just lay out for us your major findings, Marianne.
Well, what we found was really, while policy has been standing still on climate for the last few years, the special interests have not been standing still. They've been really redoubling their efforts, and as Juan said, they've quadrupled in number, the lobbyists, over the last 5 years. And we found not only have the energy companies and the manufacturers increased their efforts, but a whole range of new interests have joined in. For example, Wall Street and private equity firms, finance firms, insurance companies like AIG, they were not on the scene at all in 2003. Last year, they had as many lobbyists as alternative energy did, and they're engaged, of course, in the whole idea of a carbon market, so they have that interest. We also see cities and counties and public agencies also are lobbying in great numbers, trying to get a piece of the revenue that might be brought in from a climate program. So it's going to be a very complicated scene as lawmakers try to put together a policy, especially when you think of the urgency that Dr. Fields was talking about on the science on this matter.
Marianne Lavelle, many of those cities and municipalities were hoping to get some transit, mass transit dollars out of the cap and trade system that was President Obama has backed. But now today, in today's New York Times, we learned that the president is already planning to spend a vast amount of that money in a tax reduction program for low-income Americans. Could you comment on that?
Right. There are going to be a host of interest and really decisions to be made. The money will be brought in under this plan from the fossil fuel industry. But how do you divvy it up? For example, public transit could have a very beneficial role in getting cars off the roads and getting those carbon emissions off the roads if mass transit is built up and really supported. However, energy costs are going to go up, and what about low-income folks all over the country who really, energy already is a very big part of their monthly payments, and really the question will be, how much relief do you give? Do you give relief to low income, or does it become a kind of a middle income as well tax break? So a lot of decisions to be made, and there'll be a lot of fighting over that.
In your report, Marianne Lavelle, you say that the clean coal lobby, the so-called clean coal lobby, is the most powerful. Explain who's out there lobbying.
Right. This is the American Coalition for Clean Coal Electricity. I think you may have had them on your program. They are a brand new organization. They represent 48 coal mining companies, the coal hauling railroads, the coal burning utilities, and they decided to really have a much more strong presence. And really their argument is that we need to go slow enough to catch up with the technology for clean coal. Of course, a lot of the analysis is that we are decades away from that technology, and the planet may not be able to wait that long, and there may be other solutions at hand that we should be trying first. The clean coal industry has not only a very big organization itself, but they've hired, for example, Jack